The terminal was alive with noise, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, the distant echo of a child's laughter. But for Emily Carter, the 19-year-old aviation student standing by gate 42, none of it mattered. Her heart was locked on one thing only, the Boeing 737 that gleamed outside the glass. The jet wasn't just another plane to her, it was a dream. A life she wanted but wasn't yet allowed to live. She wasn't part of the crew. She wasn't even an intern, just a passenger in seat 16A, traveling to see her mother after months at flight school. Yet her flight uniform, folded neatly in her backpack, reminded her that she was close. So close. As she watched the pilots walk toward the jet bridge, Captain Mason, a seasoned pilot with 20 years of flight time, and his co-pilot, Officer Reynolds, something in Emily stirred, admiration, envy, hope, because she knew, deep down, that one day she'd be in that cockpit. What she didn't know was that today would be that day. Scene shift, boarding. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 482, non-stop service to Seattle. Please fasten your seatbelts. The familiar voice echoed through the cabin as Emily found her seat near the window. The hum of the APU vibrated through the floor. She could feel the heartbeat of the jet beneath her. Shoes. Beside her sat an elderly man reading a newspaper, and across the aisle a young mother soothing a baby. It all felt normal, but destiny was quietly aligning the unthinkable. As the cabin doors closed, Captain Mason's confident voice came over the intercom. "Good afternoon, folks. Weather looks clear for our route. Smooth sailing ahead." Emily smiled faintly. She'd read his interviews before. He was one of the few captains who'd trained at the same academy she dreamed of joining. She thought, if only I could just see the cockpit once. She'd take off prep. Inside the cockpit, Captain Mason ran through his final checklist. Flaps set, altimeter cross-checked, fuel balance confirmed. Reynolds responded, "Roger that." Ready for pushback. The engines roared to life, twin turbines spooling into a thunderous rhythm. The plane began to roll. In the cabin, Emily watched the world outside slide backward. Taxi lights danced on the runway. The hum deepened. Her hand instinctively reached for her seatbelt. Not out of fear, but focus. She whispered to herself, "V1. Rotate, positive rate, gear up," words only pilots knew. The man beside her gave a puzzled look. But Emily was already lost in the rhythm of flight. The plane turned onto runway 09. The captain advanced the throttles. Full power. Everything trembled. The sound was deafening, and then the Boeing surged forward. Scene the moment, airspeed 120, 130, V1. Suddenly, something felt off. In the cockpit, Captain Mason's breathing became uneven. Reynolds glanced sideways. His partner's hands trembled slightly on the yoke. "Mason, you okay?" No response. The captain's eyes fluttered. "Cap Mason!" But before the co-pilot could react, Mason's body slumped forward. The yoke jerked violently. The aircraft veered slightly left. Reynolds shouted, "Mayday!" "Captain is incapacitated!" Taking control. Scene in the cabin. Passengers didn't know what had happened, only that the engine surged harder than usual. The climb felt steeper, and a jolt ran through the cabin. A few gasps, then silence. Even the baby stopped crying. Emily sensed something wasn't right. She looked out the window. The plane was climbing aggressively, too sharply for a routine ascent. Her instincts screamed, "Something's wrong in the cockpit." She unbuckled her seatbelt slightly, trying to peek down the aisle. The flight attendants were whispering near the galley, tension written across their faces. Then one of them, a senior attendant, ran toward the cockpit door. She knocked, whispered something through the interphone, then looked back in panic. Emily's heart dropped. She could read lips and what the attendant had just said. "The captain's not responding." Scene, decision. Her hands trembled. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't allowed near the cockpit, but this wasn't about rules anymore. It was about lives. She stood up. "Ma'am," she said softly to the nearest attendant. "I'm a flight student. Please let me help." The woman hesitated, eyes scanning Emily's young face. You're a what? Flight school. 2 years. I know emergency procedures, please. Before the attendant could reply, turbulence hit. The plane shuddered violently. Trays rattled. Passengers screamed. All right, the attendant shouted. Come with me. On scene, entering the cockpit. The cockpit door opened just enough for Emily to slip inside. The smell of burned coffee and cold electronics filled the air. Captain Mason's body was slumped over the controls, his oxygen mask dangling. Reynolds was sweating, one hand on the yoke, the other trying to manage the autopilot. He looked back, shocked. Who are you? Emily Carter. Flight student. I can help. He hesitated only a second. Fine, sit right seat. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, heart hammering. Her hands hovered over the panels she'd only ever seen in simulators. But this was real. Okay, Reynolds barked. We're climbing too steep. Trim it down gently. Emily grabbed the trim wheel and eased it. The nose lowered. The pressure in her chest eased as the climb stabilized. Good. Now monitor altitude, 6,000 feet. Set to level. Roger that, she replied instinctively, her training kicking in. Reynolds glanced at her, disbelief mixing with relief. You said flight student? Yes, sir. Then welcome to your first real flight. Scene, cabin announcement. The intercom clicked. This is First Officer Reynolds speaking. We've had a medical emergency in the cockpit. Please remain calm and seated. The situation is under control. In the cabin, people exchanged nervous looks. Emily's seat was empty, her backpack still there. No one knew the girl from seat 16A was now sitting in the cockpit, guiding their fate. Outside, clouds swirled around the wings as the aircraft stabilized into level flight. Reynolds turned to her. We need to divert to the nearest airport. You ready to help me land this thing? Emily's throat went dry, but she nodded. Yes, sir. Let's bring them home. And as lightning flickered on the horizon, she reached for the radio, her trembling voice steady as she called. Mayday, mayday, this is Flight 482. Captain incapacitated, requesting emergency landing assistance. The response crackled back through static. Copy that, Flight 482. You're not alone up there. We'll guide you in. Emily took a deep breath. Her dream was never supposed to begin like this. But fate had just handed her the controls. The cockpit was a storm of sound. Alarms blinked red, radios hissed with static, and the hum of the engines filled every corner. Emily sat stiff in the co-pilot's seat, her palms sweating against the throttle levers. The headset crackled with the voice of air traffic. Control. Flight 482, this is Seattle Center. Confirm your situation. Reynolds leaned forward, voice strained. Seattle, this is First Officer Reynolds. Captain Mason is unresponsive. I have a flight student assisting. We need immediate vectors for emergency descent. There was a pause, then a calm voice replied, Copy that, Reynolds. You're cleared to descend to 4,000 feet. We've got emergency medical teams ready. You're not alone. Emily exhaled shakily, but her eyes kept darting to the lifeless figure beside her. Captain Mason slumped forward, oxygen mask still swinging gently. The man who once commanded thousands of flights now lay still. The weight of his silence filled the cabin. Scene, inner struggle. Emily's mind raced through every lesson she'd ever learned. Her instructor's voice echoed in memory. In aviation, fear is a passenger. You acknowledge it, but you never let it fly the plane. She whispered the words under her breath, and then quietly she took control. Autopilot engaged. Heading 270. Descent mode armed, she said, scanning the controls like muscle memory. Reynolds looked over, surprised again. You've done this before. Simulator, she replied. Never this real. Outside, the night had deepened. Rain began to smear the windshield. Thin streaks illuminated by the cockpit glow. Lightning flashed in the distance, splitting the sky in violent beauty. The radio crackled again. Flight 482. Confirm the condition of your captain. Reynolds hesitated. Emily spoke first. Pulse is weak, but he's breathing. We've administered oxygen. The controller's voice softened. Understood. Maintain heading. We'll have emergency landing clearance ready at SeaTac. Scene, the storm. The turbulence hit like a punch. The plane jolted downward. Gasps erupted from the cabin behind them. Hold it steady, Reynolds shouted. Emily gripped the yoke, heart hammering. The horizon vanished in sheets of rain. The altimeter spun at 5,000. 4,800. She fought the nose-up muscles straining against gravity and fear. "Come on," she muttered, her voice trembling but focused. "You are not going down." Lightning flared again, so bright it turned the cockpit white for a second. The storm outside was alive, roaring, twisting, relentless. But somewhere inside the chaos, Emily found calm. Her breathing steadied, her eyes locked on the instruments, her hands moved like they'd always belonged there. "Seen," the voice from the radio. "Flight 482, you're doing great. Stay with us, Emily." She froze. "How do they know my name?" Reynolds turned to her just as surprised. The radio continued. "This is Captain Harris, Seattle Control. Your flight instructor contacted us. He's here guiding you." Her eyes widened. "Captain Harris? He's my mentor." A pause. Then the familiar, calm tone filled the cockpit. "Emily, listen to me. You've trained for this. Focus on the instruments, not the fear. You've got 250 souls depending on you. Let's bring them home." A tear welled up, not from fear, but from the weight of belief. Someone out there trusted her completely. Seen in the cabin. Meanwhile, the passengers whispered among themselves. A flight attendant, face pale, spoke through the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are diverting for an emergency landing. Everything is under control." But nothing about this felt under control. In seat 16A, Emily's empty place was now filled by silence. A young boy stared at the open seatbelt buckle, whispering to his mother. Where did she go? The mother only held him closer, eyes glistening. People prayed, others clutched hands. Every passenger could feel it. The invisible battle happening in the cockpit ahead. Seen, the breakdown. Back in the cockpit, Reynolds was pale and sweating. Autopilot's glitching. "We're too heavy for a stable descent," he said. Fighting the trim, Emily leaned forward, scanning numbers. "Hydraulics are sluggish. Manual override?" He nodded. "Do it." She grabbed the control column and pulled slightly, and the plane responded. Slower than expected, but steady. Thunder boomed again. She swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the artificial horizon. Seattle Center, Flight 482. Manual control active. We're descending through 3,800 feet. Roger, 482. You're clear to approach runway 16L. Winds 250 at 18, gusting 24. She exhaled. The worst wasn't over. Gusty crosswinds. Heavy rain. A single runway glowing in the darkness ahead. "Emily," Reynolds said softly, "you're gonna have to take her down." Her eyes widened. "Me?" He nodded. "I can monitor systems, but my arm's numb. Turbulence hit it hard. You're the one flying this." For a moment, silence filled the cockpit, just her, the storm, and the sound of destiny breathing down her neck. Seen, the turning point. Flight 482. Descend to 1500. You're cleared for final approach. Emily's voice came back steady. Controlled. Copy, cleared to 1500 final. Approach runway 16L. The lights of the city flickered below through the rain, tiny dots of civilization, unaware of the young girl holding. 250 lives steady above them. Her mind focused, completely. Throttle, flaps, altitude, everything aligned in rhythm. "Flaps 15, Reynolds called. "Flaps 15, she echoed. "Landing gear down, gear down." The cabin shook as the gear deployed, the comforting thud echoing beneath their feet. Then, for the first time since the takeoff, Emily smiled. A small, trembling smile, the kind you give when you realize you're doing something impossible. And it's working. Seen, the prayer. The runway lights grew larger, twin lines of white cutting through the rain. ATC's final call came through. Flight 482, winds steady. "You're clear to land." Emily's heart pounded. Reynolds whispered, "You've got this, kid." Every muscle in her body was alive, the yoke heavy in her hands, the wind howling like a beast outside. She could feel the aircraft fighting her, every gust a challenge, every second a test. She whispered a prayer, not for herself, for the 250 people behind her. "Just hold together. Please." The ground came rushing up, fast, too fast. Reynolds shouted, "Flare! Flare!" She pulled gently. The nose lifted. The main gear hit the tarmac, a thud. A hard landing, but a landing nonetheless. The aircraft bounced once, then settled. Reverse thrust roared. The engine screamed. The speed bled off at 120 knots, 90, 70, then silence. Only rain tapping softly against the windows. Reynolds leaned back. Breathing hard, you did it. But Emily couldn't speak. Her eyes were locked on the runway ahead and the lights, the rain, the miracle she'd just made real, seen, the aftermath. Emergency vehicles raced toward them, red and blue lights flashing across the wet asphalt. Paramedics stormed the cockpit, attending to Captain Mason. Reynolds removed his headset slowly, turning to Emily. "You saved us," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We saved us." But deep inside she knew it wasn't luck. It was purpose. The cabin door opened, and for the first time passengers saw her. The girl from seat 16A, the one who had disappeared, now standing in the cockpit wearing a headset and tears on her cheeks. Gasps. Applause. Some cried openly, and as she stepped out into the terminal hours later, drenched in rain and emotion, her instructor met her there. Captain Harris, he simply said, "You weren't allowed in the cockpit today, Emily." But the sky decided otherwise. The world outside the terminal was gray and heavy with rain. Ambulance lights reflected off wet tarmac. Paramedics rushed through puddles, and inside the terminal, the air was thick with murmurs and disbelief. News had already begun to spread. Emergency landing at SeaTac. Passenger helped pilot land jet, but Emily Carter stood silently in the shadows of gate C-17, her hands trembling, her uniform soaked from the storm. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt empty. Captain Mason had been rushed to the hospital minutes ago, still unconscious but stable. Reynolds, exhausted and shaken, had refused to leave her side. He glanced at her now, a faint smile beneath tired eyes. "You flew that bird like a pro. Emily, don't ever forget that." She wanted to smile back, but her voice broke instead. "I didn't even have clearance to touch the controls." Reynolds chuckled softly. Today, the rules took a back seat to survival. Scene, the debrief. Hours later, in a quiet airport conference room, she sat before 3 people from the FAA and airline management. Their faces were unreadable, calm but stern. "Miss Carter," one began, "we've reviewed the flight data. You took over manual control during descent?" "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "You're not licensed?" "I'm still a student pilot, sir." 2 years of training. They exchanged glances. The senior officer leaned forward. "Do you realize what you did was both extraordinary and unauthorized?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, sir, I know. But I couldn't just sit there." There was a long pause. Then the officer sighed, and for the first time a faint smile crept across his face. "Well, young lady, unauthorized or not, you saved 250 people. That's something no regulation can cover." Reynolds, sitting beside her, couldn't help but grin. "She deserves her wings after tonight." The officer chuckled. "You might not be wrong." Scene, news breaks. By dawn, the world had learned her name. Every news station played the footage. The Boeing 737 touching down under heavy rain, fire trucks chasing it down the runway. Headlines screamed across every screen. Teen flight student lands jet after pilot collapses. 19-year-old hero saves 250 lives, midair, from passenger seat to cockpit. The flight that changed everything, reporters. Camped outside the airport hotel where the crew rested. Camera flashes burst like lightning as Emily walked through the lobby. Escorted by airline staff, microphones thrust toward her. "Emily, how did it feel? Were you scared? Would you do it again?" She paused, eyes tired but steady. "I wasn't thinking about fear," she said softly, "only about bringing everyone home." Scene, the meeting. 2 days later, Emily visited Captain Mason in the hospital. He was awake now, pale but smiling, a faint heart monitor beeping beside him. When she entered the room, he raised his hand weakly. "So, you're the one who stole my plane," he joked. She laughed through her tears. "I just borrowed it for a bit, sir." His expression softened. "I owe you more than I can ever say. You did what even some trained pilots might have frozen up doing." Emily shook her head. "I just remembered my training, sir, and I didn't want to lose anyone." Mason studied her face for a long moment, then said quietly, "Promise me something." "What's that?" "Never doubt yourself again. The sky already knows your name. Scene, the call. Later that evening, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Washington, D.C. Hello? Miss Carter, this is Director Lawson from the FAA. We've reviewed your case. Given your composure and technical skill during the emergency, we'd like to fast-track your certification review. Emily froze. You mean, yes, Lawson said. If you pass the final simulator test, you'll be eligible for a commercial license within the year. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, Lawson replied. Just keep flying. Scene, back at the academy. Weeks later, Emily returned to her flight school. When she stepped into the hangar, every student stood and applauded. Her instructor, Captain Harris, waited by the simulator, the same man who had guided her voice through the storm that night. He greeted her with a quiet nod. You kept your wings steady, Emily. She smiled. I heard your voice the whole way down. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Courage isn't in knowing how to fly. It's in refusing to fall. And that's exactly what you did. She looked through the hangar window, out toward the runway where a Cessna waited in morning light. For the first time since that night, she felt peace. The fear was gone. Only purpose remained. Scene, the legacy. Months later, Flight 482 became a legend among pilots. Aviation forums, training schools, and documentaries told her story. The passenger who became a pilot in the sky. Airlines began adding new training modules. Passenger-assisted emergency procedures. And on the cover of Aviation today, a headline read, The Future of Flight. Meet Emily Carter, the girl who changed the sky. Emily, now in uniform, her own uniform, posed beside the cockpit of a Boeing 737. She ran her fingers over the gleaming fuselage and whispered, You were my first real flight, and my first real miracle. Scene, the symbolic flight. A year later, she took off from the same airport, this time as First Officer Emily Carter, on her first commercial assignment. As the plane taxied out, she looked to her left seat. Captain Mason, fully recovered, now smiling with quiet pride. Ready to fly, partner? He said. She grinned. Born ready, the engines spooled. The runway lights blurred into a golden path. Her hands were steady. Her voice calm. V1, rotate. The plane lifted gracefully into the dawn sky. Below, the clouds glowed pink with sunrise. Above them, freedom waited. Emily looked out the window, eyes bright with memory, and in that moment, she whispered the words that had carried her through the storm. You weren't allowed in the cockpit until the sky called your name. The engines roared louder, the plane climbed higher, and Emily Carter, once just a passenger in seat 16A, disappeared into the morning light. A pilot reborn. Months later, at a small ceremony at Seattle International, she received her pilot's wings. Her name was etched onto the brass plaque of honor. But beneath it, in smaller letters, someone had engraved a new call sign, one given by the controllers that night. Angel, 16. The name spread through every tower frequency across the Pacific. Northwest, a reminder of courage born from chaos. And somewhere, every time a new pilot took off into a storm, they remembered her voice on the radio. The young woman who proved that sometimes destiny doesn't wait for permission, because some flights aren't planned. They're chosen by the sky itself.